nearly 180,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens.
Drug violence, a major problem in the border region between the U.S. and Mexico. It has claimed nearly 18,000 lives since December 2006.
September 3rd, 2012. An elderly woman stops at the Cardizo butcher shop on 29th Street in Medellin. Apparently she was planning on having a party because she bought $150 worth of meat at the butcher. But then something from the past came back to haunt her. A small motorcycle pulls up, a young man hops off, bang, bang, he guns her down. And just like that, La Madrina, Griselda Blanco, is dead at the age of 69. Now, Griselda Blanco's name is known to most of us from the documentary Cocaine Cowboys, which discussed her time in Miami in the late 70s and early 80s, where she helped make, for a time, Dade County the murder capital of the United States. She initially came in the mid-70s in Queens. She got a big case for cocaine trafficking up there in New York, came back and did her dirty work in Miami, got taken into custody in LA, managed to avoid her murder cases, and got let out and deported back to Medellin. Now, back in the heyday of Pablo and the rest, circa 1990, Medellin obtained a dubious distinction, probably having the highest homicide rate per capita of any city, I mean, other than in an actual war, ever, even much higher than the Mexican cities now of nearly 400 per 100,000. Now, at the time Blanco was killed back in 2012, Medellin had calmed way down and was on its way to like what it is now, still not a super safe city, but it wouldn't even make the top 10 for U.S. most violent. And of course, corresponding with Pablo's violent attempt to control not just the Colombian drug trade, but Colombian society, was his creation of the Sicarios. And Sicario comes from the Latin sicari, assassin. And the word was coined actually by a mysterious figure, Isaac Gutman Easternbergef. This German with Pablo set up a school for young men to learn how to commit homicide off of the backs of motorcycles. And that's what the Sicarios were known for in Medellin. And even to this day, there's little motorcycle clubs that use the exact same kind of motorcycle as kind of an homage to that era. Now, most people have heard the word Sicario from the new generation of hitters in Mexico, but while hitmen and assassins are as old as civilization, but the specific practice of keeping young men on retainer in modern urban environments for drug gangs and then paying them bonuses when they go out and actually make a kill. Well, that's really was created by Pablo and has been adopted all across Latin America, most infamously in Mexico. But as I'm going to talk about, there's U.S. street gangs involved in it too, which is kind of scary when you think about the possible implications now. Depending on the country, depending on the victim, $40 might get you whacked by a Sicario. Back when Pablo waged war on the judiciary and law enforcement in general, he put a $2,000 standing bounty on any Medellin cop, and 18 were killed in a weekend. Today's Mexican Sicarios, you may have heard of famous ones like El Chino Antrax and others, enjoy using social media to brag, to, I guess, advertise their services, and to incriminate themselves, just like the brain-dead urban criminals and rappers here in the United States. So, you know, young violent men across the world universally are using social media. I was just watching a thing about Albanians, gangs who control the yayo sales in London, making rap songs with guns. I mean, all that stuff's done for a reason. It's risky, and that stuff is used against them in court, but if you're already living a life where you might get killed or get life in prison at any time, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do to advertise and intimidate. So the first Sicario we're gonna talk about in this series is a man named Jesus Ernesto Chávez, aka El Camelo, which means the pusher in Spanish. And he's, he's of Mexican descent, but he's an American. He's a member of an El Paso street gang, Barrio Azteca. And I chose him because this really lets us get into not just the brutality, but the economic and socio-political ties between both sides of the border down there in the Southwest and its possible implications for the future of crime here on this side. Now, El Camelo is today in federal prison, presumably. He's supposed to be doing life, but I'm sure they changed his name. At the least, they have him in a witness segregation. Who knows? Maybe one day he'll get out. It's possible he's out now. I kind of doubt it, considering the crimes he had to plead guilty to. He testified against some other high-level narcos in his trial, and he admitted that he controlled a group of hit squads of sicarios that were responsible for killing at least 2,000 people in Juarez in less than a year. He said he stopped counting after a while. And this was during the big flare-up of the war we all kind of heard about back in 08, 09, when Juarez went crazy because El Chapo and Sinaloa wanted to take over from Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, who was the nephew, I guess, of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, the guy who supposedly died getting plastic surgery in '97 after transporting 25 billion in cocaine during the late 80s and 90s. So El Camelo, like I said, is a member of a U.S. street gang. He was born in El Paso, and El Paso and Juarez actually are kind of like the same city. It's just El Paso's on the U.S. side of the border, and Juarez on the south. And El Camelo is from Barrio Azteca. It was a gang formed in Texas prison system around 1986 for guys out of El Paso. I mean, Texas is such a big state. You know, you got gangs just even by region, just like in California, you got Norteños and Serranos, but Barrio Azteca has become serious organized crime. So just like in Tijuana with the gangs out of Logan Heights who have been implicated as being assassins or were for the Arellano Felix brothers when they were attempting to fend off El Chapo, which they didn't. I mean, Chapo got Tijuana and got most of Juarez. That's why he became number one for a while. The Logan Heights guys, Barrio Logan Heights, two of them were convicted of being involved in murdering Catholic cardinal at the Guadalajara airport. And in El Paso, Barrio Azteca started working with La Linea, which was the line, the police line, the Juarez police, who worked with different elements of the Juarez Cartel, or the various, I mean, there is no Cartel. There's different groups of people that sometimes work together and sometimes are enemies. And Barrio Azteca was coming across the border to kill lots of people. So not just the guns that do the homicides in Mexico, but some of the people are coming from our side. So it's important when you think about what's going on. It's not, you'll read articles about saying, you know, making reference to like the Aztec-like brutality of south of the border. Well, a lot of it, some of it is done by American citizens. And in fact, Edgar Villarreal, aka the Ken doll, who was the blonde-haired, green-eyed Laredo, Texas football player who ended up becoming the most powerful gringo narco ever. La Barbie is one of the people in Nuevo Laredo, another city that straddles a border with the U.S. city, Laredo, where he was from. elevated the scale and brutality of the violence. So you had an American-born guy in low-crime suburban Laredo, Texas, just like the Barrio Aztecas, who not only participated but helped take things on the other side of the border to another level, which is interesting at the least, if you think about it. Ciudad Juárez and El Paso form the largest bilingual, binational workforce in the entire Western Hemisphere. They're really just one city separated by the fact that they're different countries, but they blend into each other. Hundreds of thousands of people pass across the border each day, just like in San Diego, Tijuana, and that's what's was interesting for me to think about as it pertains to the future of what's going to happen with crime and cartels in America. Because if you already have people like Barrio Azteca coming across the border to do work, and the work coming from across the border to the U.S., pretty soon these cities might start blending together, and you could have formerly low crime places like San Diego, Laredo, home of La Barbie, and El Paso becoming more like Juarez. So when he eventually cut his deal in about 2011, maybe, testified, El Camelo admitted to an astounding 800 murders in Juarez, while overseeing 800 murders as the Sicario in charge of the other Barrio Azteca Sicarios. Now, these 800 murders happened between just January and August of 2009, and he thought he might have been involved in killing 2,000 people during his whole time, though he stopped keeping count after a while. And El Camelo said that the Barrio Azteca hit squads were given a quota, 8 murders a day, at the peak of the action. And remember, Barrio Azteca was helping elements in Juarez, along with La Linea, which was the Juarez police that had all gone to the dark side to fend off El Chapo, trying to take over the smuggling route through Juarez. And so 8 homicides a day was their quota at the peak of the war. Wow. Okay, like I was saying, these cities that are the main border crossings for substances from the south, El Paso, Juarez, Tijuana, San Diego, and Nuevo Laredo, you see that the Americans are a part of the problem, not just with buying the substances, sending the guns, but it's even really brutal people going over there. And I think it's a sign that, all human beings will do the same thing given a lawless environment. Speaking of lawless, what's the most infamous crimes that El Camelo oversaw? Well, there was a house party going on with about 15 young teenagers in Juarez, and El Camelo sent supposedly about 20 AK-47 armed gunmen, slaughtered them all. There really was no strong evidence that the kids were involved in the drug business, but the thing that got El Camelo and his Barrio Azteca assassins enough on the U.S. radar to go down was when they hit a Mexican-American woman named Enriquez, who was gunned down on her way to cross the border with her husband, leaving a kid's birthday party. Now, Enriquez worked at the U.S. consulate. She was involved in processing visa applications.
Officials say one of the suspects in the killing of 3 people linked to the U.S. consulate in Mexico says his gang was hunting for the vehicle.
And El Chapo had several rival Sicario groups, Los Mexicales, and the Artists of Assassination. And Barrio Azteca and their commanders felt that she was helping the rival Sicarios get visas so they could pass over the border and back easily. They could go into El Paso, do reconnaissance against Juarez people hiding out that were in the safe zone over there. So it was like you fight in Juarez, you go back over to El Paso to hide. but they knocked her down. She was 4 months pregnant. They sprayed her in the car along with her husband. They also killed another guy who was a husband of a consulate employee because his car looked the same. And, you know, that was probably the biggest thing since the Kiki Camarena murder. We know how much attention from U.S. law enforcement that caused. They just brought Carl Quintero back into custody for that, and that happened all the way back in '85. And once that woman who was probably, I mean, though the U.S. State Department didn't want to comment any further, I don't see why Barrio Azteca's El Camelo would have made that up in court. He said that was the reason, but once that happened, the crackdown came and they started kicking doors in El Paso and started bringing people into custody. And in El Paso itself, some of the same tactics that the narcos have started using in Mexico, where it's not just about Las Drogas, it's about taxing businesses. They were taxing store owners in certain parts of El Paso who supposedly were selling drugs, but they also had regular stores. So El Paso is one of the safest cities in the country, but if you think of it as just the nice part of a mega city, of which Juarez is the bad part, and you average out the crime rates, well, it's not so safe. Because many of the people getting killed in Juarez live in El Paso. Many of the people doing the killings in Juarez would live on the El Paso side. So it's a little bit arbitrary. And in this age of defunding the police, we're seeing our crime rates go up. We're seeing fentanyl and crystal become the important drugs, and Mexicans don't need to grow those in the Sierra Madre. They don't need to get it from Colombians. They get the precursor chemicals. They can make it right on the border. The border is probably going to get hotter and hotter. It's scary. I mean, cities can go from safe to not safe very rapidly. Places like Nuevo Laredo, Tijuana, and Juarez themselves 30, 40 years ago were very safe for American tourists. Worse might happen, you might get pickpocketed or sold some mint leaves instead of marijuana. And for example, like Louisville, since the Breonna Taylor situation, Louisville police has been under the gun, a lot of corruption in Louisville police. They're quitting, they're not pulling people over. Louisville's gone from very average U.S. city in terms of violent crime. Its murders gone from about an average of 50 between 80 and 1985 to in 2021 and 2022, it's on pace to be close to 200. So quadrupled because the situation on the ground changed. So if something like that starts to happen in Tijuana, El Paso, America would be a different place. People like El Camelo leading the charge and his Sicarios. Now, things got so violent in Juarez, there came a time during the wars that the El Paso Barrio Azteca members were ordered to stay away from Juarez to avoid being kidnapped or killed. Some of the people, according to El Camelo, disobeyed the instructions, and they tried to cross over to get stuff and smuggle it across the border for profit. And if they got caught, like if they were working with Barrio Azteca members that were in bad standing, they had snitched, broken the gang rule, didn't do what they were said, and they were hiding out in Juarez, and you went over there to meet with them and get some, you know, because people do a lot of smuggling in small scales on their own. You might go over there and get a quarter kilo of heroin, 1 kilo of cocaine, 50 pounds of weed. They were killing Barrio Azteca members and chopping them up and making them disappear on the Juarez side. So in summary, 8 murder a day quota for El Paso gang members in Juarez, a Mexican city. Brutally killed 15 possibly innocent high school students just to send a message, and sophisticated enough operatives to have intelligence that a U.S. consulate worker was selling visas or something to their rival Sicarios, the artists of assassination, quite an interesting name for El Chapo's team. And instead of worrying about knocking all them off, they knocked off the source of their visas to try to slow their movement into El Paso. So during the peak of all this, Juarez had 2,600 murders with the population of 1,300, giving it a homicide rate of 200 per 100,000. Only Medellin in its peak around 1990, which got up close to 400, was higher than that. And that was the birthplace of the Sicario movement, like I said at the beginning. And that idea that Pablo came up with of harnessing these young, unemployed, rough guys that maybe were just petty criminals and gang members, put them on a small salary, get them a little nice car, motorcycle, give them bonuses when they kill people. It's created standing armies of trained killers. So like I said, El Camelo cut a deal. Now the deal was against the Barrio Azteca leader Arturo Gallegos Castrillon, and he testified that Barrio Azteca had 2 teams sent to the city of Torreon to train with the infamous Los Zetas. And the Zetas, of course, were Mexican military who left the military to become, for a while, the most brutal enforcers, and then their own cartel, though they've been kind of killed off because they were so brutal, the other cartels kind of combined against them. And they were taught their ways by Los Zetas. El Camelo, aka the Pusher, a gang member from El Paso, Barrio Azteca, just one of many brutal sicarios with perhaps dozens or hundreds of homicides under their belt personally, and thousands that he oversaw leading the Barrio Azteca hit squad. I think he's important, and so is the story, because if the sicarios themselves are coming from the U.S., at some point, maybe they're just going to start doing their work over here. So that was our first feature in El Día de los Sicarios, El Camelo, Barrio Azteca, Al Prophet American Dope.